The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center offers culturally grounded resources and materials to support tribal domestic violence programs and grassroots advocates. Learn more at niwrc.org/resources.
Hello, OCO everyone. Welcome to Speaking Our Truth podcast for change by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. I'm Liam Pippin and a member of Cherokee Nation. Joining me is Tia Bajoni, our policy specialist here at NIWRC. Today we are talking with Lori Jump, Executive Director of StrongHearts Native Helpline, a confidential and anonymous domestic and sexual violence helpline for Native Americans and Alaska Natives. StrongHearts advocates offer services at no cost, such as peer support and advocacy, personalized safety planning, crisis intervention, referrals to Native-centered domestic violence and sexual violence service providers, and general information and jurisdiction and legal advocacy referrals. Hi, Lori. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here.
We're so glad to have you here with us. We are recording at Women Are Sacred, and as one of our partners, it's always nice to learn from StrongHearts Native Helpline. Since StrongHearts launched in 2017, the organization has expanded and continues to bring awareness and strives to end violence against Native women and children. What are some of the biggest challenges the org has faced since the beginning?
Well, in the beginning, we started out with a very limited operational hours. So we were open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, which is not when violence happens. And it was really a challenge for us because we knew if somebody were calling, the last thing we wanted was for them not to get an answer. So we did have it initially set up where they could simply press 1 and would be connected to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. What we found, though, was that very few of our contacts, our relatives, chose that option. And so I think it really highlights the importance of having culturally honoring services available to our relatives. This is what they need. It's what they want. And honestly, it's what they deserve. So, building up from, we started with 2 advocates, right? To today we have 24. And so that was our biggest challenge, I think, was getting to be a 24/7 operation. And knowing that, if one of our relatives was calling us, they were going to get a Native advocate. That was really critical for us.
Yeah, and I feel like that Native advocacy, speaking to a Native advocate is a lot different than speaking from someone who doesn't understand Native communities. And that's always been something that I've really valued when I look at StrongHearts Native Helpline. It's coming from a context only people within that context understands. Yeah, so thank you for that. One of the biggest challenges that Indian country faces in responding to violence is the lack of data. StrongHearts Native Helpline creates reports based on types of calls, and it breaks down the most requested services and reasons for calling as part of those reports. What sort of insights do these reports bring to the advocacy space?
Well, I think what's really, really critical is that we are gaining real-time data, right? When we look at what we experience in Indian country, it's been really difficult to find data that supports our programming. Everybody quotes the 2016 research project that was released in 2016. The research was actually done in 2010. So we're looking at data that's already 15 years old. right? And it's great data because it does establish that, our relatives experience the highest rates of violence across this country. And it's been very important. But I think it's also important to have real-time data where we can say, this is what's happening today. This is what our relatives are facing. And so, being able to provide that type of data in real time, I think is critical to just maintaining the support for our programs, the justification for them. And hopefully our tribal nations across the country are finding that useful.
Without breaking any confidentiality, can you give us an example of what kind of data you collect from the callers that you find is very valuable?
Sure. I think there's several types, right? First of all, we do try to collect demographic data. Now, if somebody does not want to provide that, that is not a problem for us, right? We go on about our business of providing support. But so we might get data that tells us where somebody's calling from, what state. We might get, their age, their gender, the types of violence that they're experiencing, the types of barriers that they're facing. What is it that they need today? So there's a lot of data, and it's really is interesting to see some of the trends that come and go, and who's calling us, and where they're from. I think it's can be very helpful. For somebody calling from, say, Wisconsin. We're here in Wisconsin today. How many calls did we don't generally give like super specific data, right? We're not going to tell you anything specific to an individual tribe. The lowest we'll go is by state, because that preserves that anonymity and confidentiality. There are times when you talk to somebody from a specific tribe, and if you were to give information on somebody that contacted, they could easily identify. Our communities are small and tight, so we don't provide individual tribal nation data. The lowest we'll go is state level.
I think that sort of breakdown of even just like region could also validate the work that's going into that state, and like the services provided by tribal coalitions or state coalitions, and it can show that the response matches the needs, or it can also highlight the possible gaps. And so, do you do a lot of collaboration with coalitions or like state resource centers too?
Yeah, we do actually. Obviously we're very supportive of the Alliance of Tribal Coalitions to End Violence, right? We're very supportive of them. We have regular calls with them as part of the NCAI task force and exchanging information and trends that way. We also provide some state reports and different reports to the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center for their policy people to look at. We do that on a monthly basis. So yeah, those are really important connections for us, and often a way for us to find out if there's a new program somewhere, right? We have our database, which is so important to us to providing the resources that we need. But sometimes, we might not have information on a specific program, and we can get that from tribal coalitions.
So your database is like a working database. It's constantly being updated?
Well, we update it once a year, right? So we reach back out to all of the programs that are in our database and say, hey, are you still operating? Because sometimes we know that programs disappear when they lose funding. Also, to make sure that they're still providing the same services. The last thing we want to do is say, hey, go to program ABC. They can help you with this, and then find out that, no, actually, they no longer have funding. So we do update it at least once a year. And then, of course, there are times when we find something out mid-year and we'll make changes that way. We also like to look at, awards that are coming out of federal programs so that we can say, oh, I don't think this tribe is in our database. So then we can make contacts that way and try to keep it up to date. At our session here this week, we did find out that there is a new tribal shelter that's going to be opening. And so that's really exciting. It's not something that we had. So we're really looking forward to adding that to our list of resources.
You know how many different coalitions or groups would be in the database?
I believe the total number we have right now is 257 Native-centered programs, right? And so when we say Native-centered, it's not just that a program might serve Native Americans. It has to be their mission to serve Native Americans and Alaska Natives. So that's a really critical piece for us. But yeah, 257 right now. When you consider there's 574 tribal nations, less than half, right? Half that, which is not okay with me.
I was curious because you mentioned that these Native-centered organizations are a big part of your collaborators, but that also made me wonder, do people call the helpline who might not identify as Native, and do you help them as well?
Yeah. As a partner with the National Domestic Violence Hotline, we have access to their database, which is much larger. I think they have close to 6,000 resources, right? So if somebody calls us, no matter where they are, we can use that database to find services. And truthfully, there are so many Native communities that don't have programs. We rely on them because we don't have the Native-centered programs in many of our communities.
Using data as a tool to support community-driven responses is the subject of one of your sessions at Women Are Sacred. The other session emphasizes the importance of safe spaces. What are some ways that people can create safe spaces in their communities?
Our session that we had today was well attended. And I think it's so important. The purpose behind our session was creating safe spaces for people that are doing this work in our communities to reflect on the work that they're doing, how they're keeping themselves well, how they're taking care of themselves, because the work we do has an impact on us. And many of us don't have those safe spaces to rely on. So the first time we held this session was at the last WAS, and it was very well attended. We went way over our time. But when somebody needs to speak and be heard and to maybe start healing from trauma, we can't just shut that down, right? So we lasted way past, the time that was allotted to us. And just really wanting to be there for each other. Again, many of us don't have that in our communities. A lot of our tribal programs are very small. There are one or two people. And where do you go for that type of assistance? So we thought it was really important to have that here at WAS, where so many of our relatives that are doing this work are here and can provide that for each other, right? And for some of them, maybe it's the first time they've been able, because again, sometimes talking to somebody that you don't know from somebody outside of your community is safest, right? Sometimes you need that confidentiality of what's said in that room and not going back to your community. We know that, a lot of our relatives suffer from imposter syndrome, from being made to feel like maybe they don't belong in the work that they're doing, or maybe there's lateral violence. We know that that's an issue in many programs, not just in Indian country. And so giving people a space to feel safe and be heard, I think is really, really important for our communities.
I think having those sort of safe spaces also opens up opportunities to have the comfort of, and this might sound a little sad, but it's true, there's camaraderie there of like, oh, this person is going through what I'm going through. It gives you opportunity to not judge yourself. It gives you an opportunity to empathize with someone else and see that empathy for yourself too. I think that's really valuable. And I think one of the biggest concerns for a lot of organizations is burnout and turnover, and having safe spaces to understand each other and having that self-reflection and understanding what our needs could be or should be could possibly potentially decrease burnout.
Yeah, exactly. I think that two things to remember. Number one, none of us can do this job alone. We need support. None of our programs offer every service that's needed. We have to rely on each other, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? Finding out who else in your community is doing this work and collaborating, as you say, right? And the other thing is that, I think many of us have these feelings of not being enough. The reality is that we can't meet all of the needs of the people that we serve. There just isn't enough money in any of our programs to do that, right? And that's a burden. That takes a toll on you. So realizing that, number one, you're doing the best that you can. Number two, you're not alone. And kind of getting some relief from that guilt that we sometimes put on ourselves. Nobody else is doing it. We do that ourselves when we feel so bad about not being able to meet somebody's needs. But having somebody else and sharing that with somebody else, we're not alone, right? There are people out there that are feeling the same way and can offer support. So
I think that's really important too, because on some reservations, you're just so isolated from people. And even though you might have a strong tribal community, having the familiarity could actually, hinder you a little bit from being more expressive and open when you come to, conferences like Women Are Sacred, because you can be in a group with people that you identify with and that nothing is going to come back home with you. You can leave it there.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we always say, we are all related. And I believe that, right? Mm-hmm. That is such a strength to know that you're never really alone. We have relatives wherever we go, and we always find each other, right? But in small community, it can be a barrier when it's your auntie or your cousin that's doing this work, and or that is a survivor, when it's an abusive partner's relative that's doing this work. Or that you have to call for services. I mean, I think that, we think about we are all related is such a strength, but there are times when it can be a barrier. And it's important to remember that, I think that's why StrongHearts is so important, is because it is anonymous, it is confidential, and sometimes you need that for your first conversation, right? And to be validated and to be heard and supported so that you can go on to get direct service from somebody in your community.
Sometimes it's easier to hear a stranger tell you that what's going on is not okay, because there's no reason for them to lie to you and say something like that. So it's like, it's easier to take in the truth of, oh, I can ask for help. And there are people out there who are willing to listen and like earnestly give me resources and support in the way that I need, that maybe I can't even see for myself. I just want to go back for a second we were talking about the statistics and the reporting and all of that. And there are some topics that might not come up too often, like the fact that we live in smaller communities, and that might be a barrier. Do you see any patterns within those statistics, or in the reports rather, that may be overlooked or people may not be as well aware of?
Yeah, I think we do see things, some, trends, right? Will come and go. More recently, we have been really seeing a lot of the need for legal assistance. That has seemed to really been more prevalent as of late. And I think more difficult to find. As some funding is drying up and being kind of reallocated to different priorities, you'll start to see some of that. It's really hard to find those legal resources. They're so few and far between. Again, I think one of the hardest lesson I think any advocate learns, and we mentioned this a few minutes ago, is that we can't meet all of the needs, right? And it's a hard lesson. It really does impact you. So when people are calling and they're looking for attorneys to help with child support, for attorneys to help with divorces, for custody, all of those things, those are critical needs. And really, probably one of the biggest reasons that people stay in these abusive relationships, right, is how am I going to support my family and take care of my children? And so it's such a critical need, and it's so hard to find.
I'm also just so touched at hearing that some of the callers you get, this might be the first time they're saying out loud what they're experiencing. And I just think that's so powerful. Even if they don't know what services they might need, they just might need someone to listen to them, to just hear from them. Do you experience that or hear that?
Yeah, the number one service that we provide is peer support. Many of the people that call us are not looking for shelter. They're not looking for specific services. They just need to be heard, to be believed, to know that they aren't alone. And that's something is a difference between what the national hotline was hearing. Something that we noticed early on, we actually had to change our database and how we were recording things, because we kept saying other. And when we talk to our advocates, it's like, what other? What is that? And it was just, they just wanted to talk. They just wanted.
You mean in the category?
Yes.
Why you're calling?
Yes. So we created something else for the advocates to check. And it's critical, especially when we have people that are calling. Let's face it, most of our communities are very small, right? And, when people just need to be heard and there's nobody in their small community that they trust, it really is I think it's life-saving. We talk about safety planning and how important that is, but this really is life-saving. Having somebody believe you, not question you, support you, really makes a difference in a survivor's experience.
Because sometimes when you're experiencing abuse or violence, you don't realize that's what it is. It might be something that's so prevalent in your community or in your home that you don't realize it's a problem and you can get help for it. And that there's people to talk to who will immediately understand and not bombard you with questions or
judge you, right? Judgment is such a big piece of it about why we don't come forward, why we don't talk. I think that understanding what domestic violence is as well, and sexual violence, everybody knows about physical violence, but we don't talk enough about emotional or psychological. Financial, yes. Somebody said today in our session that they really believe that emotional violence is worse and harder to heal from than physical violence. And it's so true, right? Bruises fade, broken bones heal, but you can never unhear something. You never unhear that. That lives in your brain forever. I had to agree with this person, but I think the emotional stuff that people experience at the hands of an abusive partner have longer lasting impacts, and the amount of people who don't know that it's violence, who will call and say, well, no, I'm not a victim of domestic violence because I've never been hit. And, so that education piece comes in.
I also think just the psychological and the emotional abuse and violence, that shapes a person's self-belief, and that can disrupt so many parts of your daily life. Like, I'm not going to go for that job because I'm not worthy enough, or I'm stupid. To be bombarded all the time, being told you're stupid, you're this, you're that, you're not enough. Like, that builds up to create a brand new self-belief, and undoing that takes years. And sometimes it's just like, there's no end goal when that happens. It's just a constant practice. And that takes so much work, and that takes so much strength. And so for someone to take that step in calling StrongHearts, just as an example, like that takes a lot of strength too. And just open, like you were saying, Leanne, saying out loud for the first time, this has happened to me. Having a safe space like StrongHearts is it's critical, it's vital, it's necessary, it's essential.
Yeah, and I think when you're thinking about that, right, it's not just what you're hearing, it's who's saying it. It's somebody that supposedly loves you, right? Somebody that cares for you, and it's somebody that you love and care about. And I think that's the worst part of it. It's somebody that you trusted, that you let into your life, that you embrace. And those are these abusive partners are the ones who are saying these horrible, horrible things to you.
I think something that's also so important is the space to be vulnerable and feel comfortable with that vulnerability. So I love that StrongHearts has different options of how you want to contact them. You can call or you can use the chat feature, and both are very anonymous. So depending on where you're at or how you want to communicate or what is safe for you to communicate, depending on what technology you're using, StrongHearts can facilitate that and talk to you on the phone or just talk to you on a chat, just whatever makes you feel safest.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We started out obviously as just a phone line, right? And then when the pandemic hit and we knew that everybody was stuck sheltering at home, not being able to leave and get out and get away from their abusive partners, we worked really hard to get our chat and our text up and running. It became just really critical for us because call volume really dropped during the pandemic, like 30%. It immediately. And so that was really important for us. It took us probably about a month and a half, but we worked that hard to get out there for people because we knew I don't care where you go, wherever you go and you look at people, somebody is on their phone, right? So you can be at home. We could be sitting this close to our abusive partner. It's not unusual for somebody to be on the phone. They can be having a chat and not have to even say, not have to say a word and still be.
Or even just having the comfort of safety in that moment. Mm-hmm. Like maybe getting out of that situation physically in that moment is impossible, but at least like, oh, someone knows out there, like what's going on and how I'm feeling, and just helping me ground, or, whatever crisis intervention is provided in the moment is most appropriate. So StrongHearts does crisis intervention and lots of support, different types of support for victim survivors of violence. But StrongHearts also is out in the community often. Every time I see you, there's always like an update of like, oh, we went to this event, we hosted this, we were, there are so many moments of being in community, which I think is wonderful for the awareness of what your work provides. But can you tell us a little bit more about the events that you've hosted? I know recently, during the National Week of Action, you held an event for missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, we hosted a chat session, an online chat, with one of our board members, Sandra Pilgrim Lewis, who also happens to be probably my biggest mentor, somebody that I can count on regardless of what's happening. I know she has my back. I know she has my best interests at heart. She has the best interests of StrongHearts at heart. And so she was the guest on the show and talked with our communications manager about the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives movement, about the crisis, right? About what we can do to help. It was very well attended, and we're just so blessed to have Sandra as part of our.
There are also written resources on the website, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Other than the reports, there's ways that people can sort of educate themselves on their own and understand what the advocacy looks like for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge that not everybody is ready to have a conversation, right? They're still coming to terms, I think, with what they're experiencing and trying to process it. And so they might be looking for resources. What are the red flags of domestic violence? And so we have some blogs about how do I plan for my own safety? And so there's a blog about that. What does safety planning look like? What should you be thinking about? And so there are, a number of articles that are available on our website that I think can be really helpful to somebody that's maybe not ready to have a conversation, right? How to be supportive to somebody in your life that you think is experiencing violence. Those kinds of things. We are in the midst of going through an update to our website. We want to improve the user experience and make it more user-friendly. And so that'll be some changes that you'll see coming in the next probably 4 to 6 months. I don't know how long these projects will take, but that's really important to us to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Sometimes it can be hard to navigate. And so we're really looking forward to doing that and being able to update our website more quickly, add things to it, add resources to it.
StrongHearts is an essential part of the advocacy movement, and it feels necessary to support Native victim survivors and communities. So, what are some ways that people can be involved with StrongHearts, and how are you all supported?
I think one of the best things that people can do for us is to share our information. because we are out at many events. We go to conferences and present. We go to powwows and host tables and, trying to get our information out to the people that need us. And so I do think most people that are at this conference, for instance, have heard of us, know something about us, right? But are they the people that need us? Right? So getting into those communities and getting our information into the hands of people that need us is a little bit more difficult. And so sharing our messages, right? Follow us on social media and share our messages so that maybe one of your friends or a relative that's experiencing violence will see it. Kind of amplifying our message, I think is really important. There's only so much we can do as a national organization. It's really hard to get into all of the tiny little communities that we have across Indian country. Make sure that the people that need us know that we're here. And so that's what everybody can do. We don't have volunteers or anything like that, you know what I mean? But just really helping us to amplify our message in your community.
And do you accept donations?
We do accept donations. And, you can go to our website and there's a donate button. Mail us a check.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really wonderful conversation. And we'll be sure to link all of StrongHearts information in the show notes, and especially ways to get a hold of you on social media, and making sure that the links to your website is provided too.
Thank you so much, Lori. I really enjoyed this conversation and I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always nervous about this type of a conversation. But I find that when we're in community with relatives that are also doing this work, it's just such an honor to be here with you and to share the StrongHearts story and just spend time.
To everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. Take care.